Hey there, Patricia. So this week, Eric and I are giving some screencast feedback to students on their letter to Jake drafts, and I just had the pleasure of reading your draft. And so I'm going to take a few minutes in here to talk about what's already working really well, and then a few suggestions as you think about revising and submitting the final form of this essay. All in all, just a really solid essay. I think you're demonstrating excellent comprehension of the concepts from Chapter 3, The Good Life. It I was really impressed with how well you were able to distill those ideas down for a hypothetical audience member who hasn't necessarily studied any ethical theories. And so it's one thing to demonstrate comprehension of the theories, and it's another skill to be able to do that in a way that somebody who hasn't read anything necessarily about Socrates or Mill or any of these other sources can follow along and make sense of it. And so I think in terms of audience concerns, you do a really nice job of addressing our audience for this paper, who is Jake, right? All in all, I think that this is just a really strong draft. And so I just get to tell you what's working well and maybe give you a few small suggestions for how you could bump it up as you're thinking about revising. So diving into this first paragraph here, and you should be able to see these comments if you look at the essay in the assignments where you turned it in. And so hopefully these will show up for you outside of the screencast as well. So I think you get straight to the point in your first paragraph, and you offer up this very clear thesis claim or position that you are going to support his decision to go back to school and become a nurse. And then we get the sense that you're going to support that position throughout the rest of your essay, which you do. And so I thought you did a really nice job of embedding your sources. And so managing all of those different sources that are contained within Eric's source, his chapter, very smooth citations throughout the whole essay. I never get tripped up as a reader. It's always clear to me where the original source is coming from. Where the source material is coming from, and then also where you found it. And so making that distinction is really good. So you've worked that out really nicely in the essay. This paragraph does just an awesome job of summarizing this idea of high quality and low quality pleasures very concisely, very clearly, yet thoroughly. And so I think by the end of this paragraph, Jake will have a pretty good idea of, okay, I think I understand what she's talking about there. And then moving into this next paragraph, this is where you start to apply Mill's ideas of high quality pleasures to Jake's specific situation. I love your voice in here because it's not condemning. You're not saying, oh, Jake, you're an immature, frat boy kind of thing. You're choosing the easy way out. You're very understanding, like, Jake, of course you're struggling with this decision. Anyone would struggle with it. And so this sort of empathetic voice really builds your ethos or your credibility, I think, as a writer and as somebody in a position to give advice. And so I just think that the voice works really nicely in here. But then you gently lead him into the heart of the issue here, which is this really going to satisfy you long term? Based on what you said about your goals and desires, about the things that you want to accomplish in this life. So I love that you're using this questioning approach with him. Would this type of work continue to be pleasurable to you in 10 years from now? What about 20 years from now? This type of pleasure can only be repeated for so long before it gets boring. I love that. So nice application of that idea of low quality pleasures kind of running out of some of their charm and their effect and their luster after a while. Is it challenging to your intellect? How rewarding can your current job be if it's effortless for you? So these are excellent questions that I think for Jake to think about. And then you kind of segue into this idea of, let's think about how things feel when we work hard for them and how pleasurable that is. And I think you're off to a really great start with that point. And I'm going to encourage you just to dig in a little bit deeper there. And so these are good questions. But in addition to asking Jake, maybe just asking Jake to imagine it, maybe you can offer him some concrete details. Okay. So can you help Jake imagine what this payoff that you're talking about might actually look like as a nurse? So if Jake is in nursing school, what might one of those payoff moments look like? Jake, you've studied really hard with your cohort and your community of peers. your nursing peers for weeks and, and you get that A on an exam. Like, how does that feel, Jake? Jake, you've worked hard throughout your whole program and now you're walking at graduation. How does that feel? Jake, you've just administered your first flu shot during a clinical successfully, a shot that could save somebody's life out in the real world. How does that feel? And so I'm having trouble getting into this comment. Here we go. And so giving Jake some concrete examples of what the payoff looks like, both in nursing school and then maybe also out in the real world. What are some real kinds of pleasures or joys or moments of pride and self-actualization that actual nurses might experience out in the world? I think that just might add another layer of persuasiveness. The other thing that I hadn't considered suggesting until I got to the very end of your essay and saw that you made a reference to Jake being able to potentially enjoy other long-term rewards, like becoming a PA or an EMT. And that sort of got me thinking, okay, what you're really talking about there is that other aspect of fecundity, not the repeatability of the pleasure, but that idea that fecund pleasures open up new doors. They give us opportunities to have experiences that we never would have had if we didn't pursue that difficult path in the first place. And so I'm suggesting here that you might think about developing another short paragraph at the end of your Mill paragraph and before you get into Socrates, where you discuss this idea of fecundity as one where high quality pleasures are fecund and that they open these doors, right? And so at the resort, things are pretty much going to look the same, right? The clientele might change, new faces come and go, but his job is going to be stagnant. He's going to do the same thing year after year after year after year. However, nursing is dynamic, right? Nursing, the challenges are always changing, the opportunities are flowing. And so what might Jake think about in terms of those new opportunities? So let's see. You already gave some great examples at the end. Who knows, Jake? You might get out there and find that you thrive so much in this environment that you want to go on to become an EMT or you want to be a doctor even. Or what are some other possibilities? Maybe, Jake, you have the opportunity to participate in a study that's being conducted at the hospital, a national study that's going to be published for other, people in the medical field to learn from. Or Jake, maybe you have volunteer opportunities that nursing school can bring you. Maybe someday you can volunteer at your kids' schools and talk about healthy eating habits or those kinds of things. So I'm using my imagination. I'm not a nurse, but I'm trying to imagine what kinds of fecund opportunities might exist for someone who's a nurse. And so I think you have an opportunity here where you could kind of tease that idea out a little bit more. Okay, and then you move into Socrates, and this is awesome. The explanation of Socrates' three aspects of soul. I think you just really nail it down very nicely, and I think this is a great way to end this paragraph. An unhealthy psyche is one where your appetite is governing all three aspects. That's it exactly, and so just right on the nose there. And then you have this nice little application paragraph. I think Socrates would ask you, if you felt that you had a healthy psyche at your job, he would say that you have the ability to make a rational decision on what is right and that you possess the willpower to resist temptation to your desires. I believe Socrates would say that you may feel like you have everything you want in your current job, but you're lacking what matters most to a healthy soul. So all really good points, all excellent advice. My suggestion here is just to flesh that out or tease that out a little bit more. So maybe what details could you add to show Jake that things really are out of whack in his current situation, and that if he does push himself into this position of going to nursing school, it may be challenging, but it may bring his soul more into alignment or more into harmony, the way that Socrates envisions us needing to flourish. And so, for example, here's kind of what came to mind for me. Jake, you are spending every day getting these low quality desires or appetites met, but your current job is not one where you have to use reason or willpower. All that you do is continuously indulge in these low quality pleasures. And then how might nursing school compare to that? In nursing school, maybe you could show Jake how he's going to have to apply his willpower. He's going to have to use more reasoning to balance out those kind of runaway appetites that are happening right now in his low quality job. And so maybe just teasing that out with a few more details to help Jake really see how he is currently lacking a healthy soul. I think he could use a little bit more help getting there. This next example from Shankar Vedantam, who studies giving and how it makes us happy and how we are scientifically wired, biologically wired to give. That's great. And I just think your application of that is awesome. Like, yeah, you get to experience a little bit of that, Jake, but imagine what that feels like when you're helping someone who, I like that you call it a legitimate need, right? Somebody who is not just indulging in their own appetites, but somebody who actually has a real need, okay? And so that's excellent. I think that works well. Your final conclusion paragraph is quite strong. So all in all, once again, Patricia, just a really solid first draft. I think you're demonstrating excellent comprehension and application here. The suggestions I'm offering are just a few extra things that you could consider if you wanted to bump this essay up to the next level. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. It was such a pleasure to read your work, and I look forward to seeing your final draft.